let's talk about the cemetery at Washington Memorial at Valley Forge. People often don't know it's there. So if you see Defender's Gate, you see that, you go straight through there, you can walk through the path. Tell me about the cemetery there.
The cemetery was designed by a man named Thomas Sears in 1910. Thomas Sears was a landscape architect who made a number of gardens throughout the country and worked in Philadelphia. He had an office in Philadelphia. And he's buried there, as a matter of fact. Um, the cemetery is a tree covered place. The graves are planted amongst the trees. Yeah, there are winding roads back there. I think we have a number of interesting people. We have Alexandra Scott, who founded Alex's Lemonade Stand. We have Philander Knox. We have a survivor from the Titanic buried there. We have a person who went down with Flight 93 during 9/11. He was one of the people, we believe, who stormed the cockpit to try to bring the plane down.
One of the important parts of Washington Memorial at Valley Forge is Lafayette's door. Now, I've taken pictures in front of it. I've been there. I've seen it. I love it. It's blue. Can you explain to me? I know that the alliance between the French and Washington's Army and Navy was celebrated at Valley Forge during the encampment, but that's about all I know. Can you fill me in on the history of that?
The announcement of that alliance, which was signed in Paris in February of 1778, reached Valley Forge, came to George Washington's attention on May 5th of 1778. And this was such a earth-shaking event for the American cause. Washington immediately realized how important this was. Not only had the United States been recognized by France, which, diplomatically speaking, was important. Obviously, you don't sign a treaty with some two-bit revolutionary. You sign a treaty with a country. And so the United States had been recognized by France. Washington also realized, of course, that the Treaty of Alliance, it was alliance against whom? It was essentially an act of war. So we now had an ally against the British. And it was a very strong, a powerful
Now, what do
ally.
you think of the theory? Because some people say, tell me what you think of this. Some people say that the American Revolution was the first World War. Do you agree with that?
Actually, the First World War was what we call the French and Indian War, which had occurred in the 1750s, because it was between France and England, and it took place all over the world. It took place in India and America and Europe. It was, however, because the French lost it and lost a number of, for example, they lost Canada. It was one of the galling events that encouraged them to seek revenge. And therefore, they were more than happy when they saw that there was a good chance of inflicting some damage on the English to come to our assistance in 1778 up until Yorktown, 1781.
So we have the French alliance, which is announced at Valley Forge. And I think it's important to say, which we say at Valley Forge, that the Washington's army marched in. They were losing. They had lost Philadelphia. They had lost Paoli. They had lost battle. They had lost.
German.
They came to Valley Forge for the winter encampment to regroup. And thanks to General von Steuben and other people, they became an army, a cohesive army at Valley Forge. So they marched in as 13 militia. They marched out as one army. And when I see the door, Lafayette's door, that's what I think about. but how did it actually come to be part of the chapel, that door?
Father Burke, the founder of the chapel, was not just a priest, but an historian and a very strong supporter, of course, of democracy. And he saw Lafayette as a symbol of democracy. One of the windows in the chapel is dedicated to Lafayette. And it was dedicated at a time during the First World War when the French were on their back foot because of a German offensive in 1918. So it was very important that to Burke that the chapel honor Lafayette and the French participation. And so this door with its fleur-de-lis and the bronze medallion dedicated to Lafayette. I mean, Lafayette was just a young man. He was only 19 or 20. And all the other generals who were honored were in their 50s and 60s and had a lot of experience. Lafayette didn't. But Lafayette was an idealist. He was a Republican in the traditional sense of the word and believed in democracy. He was an idealist, and he was very, very close to Washington. Washington and Lafayette established a father-son relationship. So it's logical that in a memorial and a church that is a memorial to George Washington, Lafayette and the French assistants would be honored and commemorated.
So, of the founding fathers, who is your favorite besides George Washington?
Well, I would say Alexander Hamilton. Well, he was a brave and accomplished military man. So he served his country and risked his life, not just as the other founders would have. They risked being hanged if if things didn't go well. But that was a big if. He risked his life every day in battle. But also, he was a brilliant man who really had a very strong influence on the Constitution, on what went into the Constitution, on persuading New York to ratify the Constitution, and then, of course, occupied a very important role in the first administration of George Washington. So he was really a Renaissance man, and we owe a great deal to his. Obviously we owe a great deal to all the founders, but I just happen to I like Hamilton. Yes, I like him because he risked his life.
Okay, I want to ask you about the cloisters. They are where a lot of people in our area go to take prom pictures, wedding pictures. They're gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. They are built of limestone, correct? And so, is that something that needs to be preserved and restored?
Yes, yes. The cloisters
Yes.
are deteriorated dreadfully. Um,
Mm.
the cloisters are carved from limestone, and the limestone has deteriorated through rain and probably some pollution from passing automobiles. Um, the limestone tracery in each bay is unique. So if you go to the New York Bay, you will see a different design of the limestone tracery from that in the New Hampshire Bay or the South Carolina Bay or the Georgia Bay. There are really, it's a beautiful structure. It's a place of calm, obviously photographically appealing, and it's in desperate need of restoration and preservation. And particularly, we'd like to have it done by the 250th of the winter at Valley Forge.
People don't understand, and I know they don't because I'm there very often and I see people taking pictures and I see people enjoying the cloisters. And I think that people don't understand that that is private property, which people are welcome to enjoy, but it's all the restoration and preservation of the cloisters and everything else at Washington Memorial Valley Forge is funded by donors and members of the church and not by the government. It's not officially part of Valley Forge National Park. And so if people want the cloisters to remain there as part of our community, people need to help with the preservation fund, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very, very important. And frankly, although, we are honored, pleased in one sense that people like to have their pictures taken. The tremendous amount of traffic, the wedding parties, the engagement parties, the proms, and one thing and another, wear this thing out. They have caused to a certain extent the deterioration of the cloisters. And so, we try to allow people to do it. It was
Yeah.
built for the American people, and the American people, I think, should appreciate it and say we'd like to restore this.
Yes, and the chapel is a functioning congregation, but there is a organization that people can make donations to that is not religious, it's secular. And that fund all goes towards the restoration and preservation of the entire campus. And I think that, I mean, I've enjoyed it for many, many years. I'm part of that community. And I think that if we want to keep Washington Memorial Valley Forge there, we need to support it financially. That's what I think.
Well, I think you think right. Let me just say that the 501c3 is secular, i.e., it is not religious, and it has no religious purpose, is the Washington Memorial Heritage. And that is the charity, the charitable thing that was set up alongside the chapel strictly for preservation and conservation. So money that
Yeah.
goes there, there are many, for example, there are many companies that will not give to religious institutions, but they will give to
Yeah.
secular ones. And so that has been set up to accommodate that distinction and that need. And so all the money goes to limestone and brick. It doesn't go to electricity. It doesn't go to salaries. It doesn't go to worship services. It's strictly for restoration and preservation.
Yeah. Well, it's a gorgeous place, and I have been there. I've been there on Christmas. I've been there in the middle of summer, and I'm Jewish. And I find it to be just a place of a holy place, even though it's a different religion. It's not my it's not the religion I grew up with. But I find it to be such a special place, and I'm so glad that it's there right across 23 from the Grand Parade. So if people have not been there, you can go. If you're lucky, Gardner will be there to walk you through and share the history with you. But we're also going to ask people to support the 501c3, 3C, C3, whatever it
I,
is. It
I,
needs donations.
yes, 501c.
And we hope that C3, that's right. That's right. So we want to encourage people to get involved with the Heritage Fund and support Washington Memorial at Valley Forge.
I would say, you don't have to record this, but it was the Jews whose concept of history was unique in the um, ancient world because they believed it was not cyclical. They believed that God had a plan, and that God had chosen the Israelites to execute that plan, essentially the redemption of mankind. And so, the founders believed very strongly in what they called divine providence. They believed that God was acting as the Torah said he was acting through man to achieve his aims. And the founders believed that part of God's plan for mankind was the founding of the United States. Now, this, of course, is a bit of a stretch for some people, But it was not a stretch for the founder of the chapel. It was a firm belief. So it is not surprising that everybody, regardless of their faith, finds, whether they're aware of it or not, inspiration in what is clearly a sacred space, sacred to Christians, sacred to Jews.
I would say that the founding of the United States, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the freedom of religion, that was, as we know, one of the most important principles founding this country. That was not the case even just in England, you know? And so the fact that Jews have been part of America since its founding, and the fact that although there is rampant anti-Semitism everywhere in this world, the
Oh,
fact that we
absolutely.
could be part of, yeah, it's, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. These are the founding principles of the United States. And that has made the United States, for most of its history, a haven for people of my faith. And so I connect to that very much.
I mean, it's very important. And one of the Thomas Jefferson window of democracy, which is near the front of the chapel, has a medallion, a picture in it, which is called uh, freedom of the word and freedom of religion. And it shows three figures. One of them is wearing a kippah. One of them is a Protestant, some denomination. One of them is a Roman Catholic. And it essentially acknowledges one or two of the early resolutions in either Pennsylvania or one of the other states. We're not absolutely sure which one, possibly New York, essentially enshrining the freedom of expression and the freedom of religion. So those were back in the early 18th century. So these things are very important as part of the American tradition and honored in the chapel.
Yeah. Yes, yes. And that's what makes it a really great place. And I'm very grateful that it's there. And I'm grateful that people like you have been supporting it for all of these years and making sure that the entire campus is here for centuries to come, I hope.
It's been here 120. Want it to be another 1,000, at least another 120.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for making the time to speak with me today. It's an honor
You're
to have this conversation with you, and thank you so much for making the time to do so.
certainly welcome, Melissa. It has been a pleasure. I hope I have not bored you with too much detail, too much historical stuff, but I feel passionately about it, and I love to communicate my passion with anybody who will listen.
I will always listen. So you're welcome back to Mainline tonight anytime. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Bye bye.